excited to record this wrap-up session of our podcast.
It's already the wrap-up session, right? It seems so far in the future when we started planning this thing. Nah.
It does. Let's talk for just a minute about this podcast, and what this experience has been like. Because we had talked about it for really, we've been talking about doing something like this since 2013 when we both got here.
Yes, and then more intensely in 2020 and 2021. And now it's 2023. And here we are. And we have had a first season of 5 guests. And I thought it was fun. It was really great. Those of you who have listened to the whole series, or at least picked up one of the episodes, we pick themes based on Marian McKibben-Dama's book, Hope: A User's Manual, and then kind of brainstormed who could we invite to talk about each chapter. And at first, I thought that was an interesting process, like to come up with who could we talk about that, and who would be a great person to go deeper in that topic. Yeah,
we really focused on people. We wanted people that we already had a relationship with because of the very origin idea of the podcast being the Sunrise Road, something very local and specific to who we are as spiritual leaders of this community of faith, but also reaching out and recognizing our many connections with the worldwide community. So really, really excited about those that we did reach out to. Super excited to have the author of the book, Marian McKibben-Dama, who is just so amazing, and to have Mary Pfeiffer was amazing. To have Judy Hart and Tim Scholl, both of whom I've known in different ways, and then they came together, and now I want to make sure to bookmark that we want to talk about the play as well.
Oh, yeah.
I was so excited I choked.
In that episode we talked about kind of like that in preparation of their newest play, and now the play is over, and so we definitely need to get that.
And then to talk with Ben McConnell about justice and community organizing, and then to wrap up with our friend Robert Magola. So really excited about the guests that we had. And I think one of the things that was exciting that we had both talked about is we wanted in the beginning to say that these were conversations with interesting people, in part because we didn't want to oversell that we ourselves were going to be that interesting, but because we feel like there are so many interesting people who are connected with our community. And that's been a joy for me in my journey here as pastor at Eastridge and in Lincoln, Nebraska, is just that there are so many interesting people. So
they're great people. Yeah. And it was fantastic to have our first guest say yes to be on here. Now, I got to say, this whole podcast thing, I mean, we have had some preliminary experience with our after worship, after chat in the times of our online service. But this was a little bit different, I think. And I sometimes was not quite sure what hat I'm now wearing. And am I not the interviewee? And who am I talking to? Is anyone even listening to? And I said to you on a different occasion, I was like, sometimes I'm wondering, can I be me here? Or particularly with this topic, hope, and I find this such an important topic, and sometimes I hate this topic so bad, and I was like, should I just now here call on our guests to say I don't see it that way, or should I leave it like that? And so I think we also have this opportunity on this wrap-up session to have a little bit opportunity to go through some things that we resonated with, and on also stuff maybe we hung up on.
So I just want to say and claim this for everybody. I say this often, Thomas, I don't know how you feel about when I say this, but So maybe you can share with me in this comfortable, private, public space.
Yeah.
When I say very often that Thomas and I disagree about a lot of things. Do you think that's how do you feel when I tell people we're maybe it's not that we disagree, we are not in agreement about everything.
I also think that the disagreement is often part of our process and the way we approach a topic or something like that.
Yeah, but I also think that it's very Presbyterian of us, because I think that it's through those conversations that we sort of refine what it is. I think usually we do end up coming around to an agreement about some things. But it is after like a process. And so I guess I just say that because we very often as people spiritually are in different places at different times. And I guess my hope would be that over time, as we do the podcast, that we would each feel very more comfortable to say that's actually not what I think as a person.
Right.
Because there are some things that do you feel this way? There are some things that I have to think or believe as a pastor.
Right.
But as a person, I may
on the podcast, you're not the pastor. Well, we still are pastor, but I think the disagreement aspect, and I want to kind of elaborate, not to belabor that point, but I think there's also that element, of course, that not just you and I disagree with each other sometimes, but I often disagree with myself because I'm many, their voices and there's that going on, and so I really believe doing a podcast and talk about topics that matter with guests that have something to say. The authenticity is very important, but also with kind of like with that asterisk, that authenticity. Tonight, I'm probably not the same person I am right now, or I might see things slightly different when I'm exhausted and the kids don't want to go to sleep or something like that. So,
because
yeah,
I think that's really important to note that we did a lot of the recording of these starting in December, and we recorded a lot of them in January. And today it's the 1st of March, and the sun is shining.
Yeah.
And that is very different experience for me than sitting in my office or even at home in a room where, it fights for light and recording and like, it's just a very different headspace in January.
Right.
So let's get into some of the weekly stuff. We have both, I think, re-listened to most of the podcasts, all of the podcasts, and so we want to just kind of go through and highlight a few things. And I do want to thank all of our listeners who have reached out. Many listeners have reached out and said that the conversations were interesting and intriguing, and that definitely the guests. And thank you for this comment. I love. I can't even remember who it was, but I love the person who said, your guests are really interesting. And I thought, then we're doing it right. Because it really is about these interesting, fabulous guests. So let's start with Marianne, your friend, now my friend. Marianne,
my friend and my coach in an important phase of ministry here. And I just, it's her book that kicked us off in this series. And I think if anyone could convince me to talk about hope, then it was her. and so I think I said in conversation with her, I loved that she started off with what hope is not, because I think hope is such a, I don't know, it's kind of like kindness. It's kind of like live, love, live, love, laugh. It sounds like something that you can put on the wall and it looks nice. And I think we often use the word hope in ways to short circuit grief. or to hotwire grief. And so I was so grateful for her that she starts her book, and we in a conversation we talked about that, what hope is not, because we need to become clear what we talk about when we talk about hope. That we don't just talk about the niceties. And those of you who know me know I'm very allergic to to niceties, to things that looks pretty and sounds pretty. And it was like, and particularly is used as their kind of comfort. And Kate Bowler kind of coined the word of silver lining, right? As a verb. That's the kind of, there's always a better tomorrow. There's always that's that thing about where I think Marianne McKibben really emphasized that hope is not optimism. It's not like, oh, there's going to be sun after the rain, just look on the bright side, all kind of those cheap answers that we give ourselves because we don't want to stay in that uncomfortable place. But hope is actually, and then these different chapters, hope is actually sometimes it's something that we need to wrestle for, or that is worth sticking it out, and or it's already there, and so yeah.
What do you think, Thomas, about because I'm sitting here connecting and thinking about, because we also did a book study at the same time, and so we sort of, in that conversation with our book study folks, we talked obviously a lot about hope, and hope was so many things to so many different people. And I wonder what you, now I'm interviewing you, what you might say to and how you would react to this. And these are my sort of processing of all these conversations about hope. One is, I wonder if hope, we often think in society about hope as a way out. I wonder if hope allows us a way through.
I like that. I like that a lot. I
also wonder about cheap grace and cheap hope as connected to cheap hope is a way out.
There's that. And I think the talk about hope, I think I need to clarify something. I love hope. I sometimes don't like to talk about hope. And I particularly don't like the hope talk when it is used in a sense of trying to give it to someone else. I think this is an extreme. I think this is the challenge. How can you give hope to someone?
Okay, you're going to have to flesh. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, I need some hope right now, and then the person tries to give me some hope and gives me you should read this book, or I don't know, go out on a walk. All these recipe kind of things. I feel like it's so hard to bring in hope from the outside. I think hope almost always has to be explored or experienced from the inside. And I've seen this in different parts with our guests. I mean, like when the conversation with Judy Hart and Timothy Scholl, when Judy Hart talks about how Angel Theater started as a place where women learn to tell their story.
I was just thinking that.
In the ensemble, this story was listened to, and then let's play it. And so there's that, or when Father Magola said that hope is already there, and our job is to discover it with them together. That is such a different way to think about hope than, oh, this person is hopeless, and I need to bring hope in this situation, because that
give them my hope.
I need to give you my hope, because and I would even ask, there's like, do I feel the need to give that person hope because their hopelessness is making me uncomfortable? And so the whole saviorism comes in there, that I feel like I need to bring hope so I feel better. And then I think it distorts hope even more. Yeah.
I would like to say
of the things I know about you is that you're really resistant to that. Like in general, I mean, I think, we could swap in any other word, any other fruit of the spirit. Like if you feel that you are lacking in faith, the worst thing I, MJP, can do for you, TD, is say, this is what you should believe. Like that's exactly the wrong way to get you on board, in my experience.
Right.
But I think that's a beautiful, because I was just about to push back on that and say, so are you saying that hope is an individual thing? Like hope has to be inside of us. I think I always think of that Tobey Maguire in what was that movie? And he says, you can't stop something that's inside of you. It's the movie, it's like all in black and white. And then at the end, it becomes a movie in color. And I think of that, like you can't stop something that's inside of you. So a mustard seed of hope, of faith, of love. I thought it was interesting that many of our guests, not just in the beginning with Marianne, but many of our guests talked about 1 Corinthians 13, including our friend Robert Magola, who, hope, faith, hope, and love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And I sensed in all of us a little bit of pushback to hold love up as the ultimate, because even, as Robert said, without hope, which he really seemed to define as agency, he really seemed to define that as the ability, and
there's always something you can do, and to discover what however small what that is, what your choice is, what you and sometimes it takes the other person that really listens to you for you to realize that there is, however small, something you can do in this situation. Yeah. Agency, I think, is a good word there. Yeah.
And she doesn't talk about it. Marianne doesn't talk about it so much in that particular way, but she does say now, because if you're listening to the podcast and you haven't listened to the sermons, our sermons are online on Facebook and YouTube. And I can't remember which one it was in. Might have been, oh gosh, I can't remember which one, but it was in a sermon that you preached, Thomas, about doing the next right thing. And that Anna song from Frozen 2. You can't see fully what's so far in front of you. You don't know how this is going to end up, but where do you find the hope to do just the next right thing?
Right.
Next right thing. And to move forward in that way, trusting and believing and hoping that in doing that, you will end up at going through, you will be able to move through whatever it is that has put you in that cave in Frozen 2.
Yeah. Agency, or at least that your story is seen and heard. I heard that too in some of our guests in our conversations.
I think I'm thinking all about of them.
Yeah, exactly. I thought about the conversation with Tim and Judy, but I also think about when with Ben McConnell, it was like the practice of hope really begins with listening and being heard, even with the experience. Again, it's vulnerability that comes in there too, and to be able to share what's hard, and experience connection with others who experience something similar, and then of course with Ben's conversation and his work in the justice ministries, to what can we do together? How can we get other people involved in that?
So here's what happened with Ben, with my friend Ben, our friend Ben. So we recorded this with Ben, and I want to, Ben, if you're listening, I want to claim that I was not fully listening. And I had not been fully listening to Ben. And then I had the opportunity to go to Orlando for the DART convention, for clergy, the DART clergy convention. And I was sitting in a class that Ben was teaching, and he was talking about his, what keeps him up at 3:00 in the morning. And I thought, I have not been listening. Like, it's my job to listen. And I have not been listening. And then it made me think about the training that we need for listening. Because we really don't listen much as a society. Sorry, I have another cough.
Yeah. And I mean, that, of course, you started off with that question, how that our podcast experience is like, this is one of the growing edge challenges when I realize we have guests here. And I mean, it takes an art form to really listen to our guests and not be in your mind with your next question that you're going to ask them, but to be actually really present with that. That's why the greats are great in that art form.
Yeah, I think what I would connect through all of them, Mary Pfeiffer, Judy and Tim, Ben, and Robert, is being seen, being heard, the power of listening, and a lot of this is Stephen ministry stuff or pastoral care stuff that like the power of just being present with somebody, not because you're attempting to change their situation, but because you are there to bear witness, to bear witness to what is happening in them. And so what does that mean? The sort of reflection, which I was at this DART clergy conference, and we were sitting around these tables, and I was sharing with them that sermon that you preached. It was during the pandemic, like early on in the pandemic, when the Beatitudes came up in the text, and you preached on them. And as part of that sermon, you said, to blessed, what does that word blessed mean? And you said, bear witness. That a big part of the Beatitudes is the ability to bear witness. And I've shared that several times, but what does that mean, to bear witness? And I really think that it means to accompany alongside in such a way that someone else can come to an understanding and an ownership of their own story. So how can I claim my own story? How can I identify where God is in my life or where God isn't in my life? And really, in thinking about that, I've said this first couple of weeks of Lent, allowing ourselves to be surprised, because I don't think that God is where we think God is. I think God is where we think God isn't.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I was just trying to think. I don't remember the sermon I preached, but
I never remember any of my sermons.
I'm thinking where that come from, and I have a suspicion that it came from a thought that I heard from the late Rachel Held Evans when she talks about the difference between curing and healing, and that healing, but curing is like, it never happened. Let's just trying to fix the situation by healing. And she talks about the importance of anointing. Healing is the aspect of putting a salvage on the wound, and says what happened really matters. What happened here mattered. And for that, I think in the Beatitudes I see that there is like the what's so great about being sad, right? I mean, but the blessed is Jesus saying here, this your story, your experience here really matters. And that's what I see here in the power of storytelling. That's what I see in conversations where you share with each other what keeps you up at night. And that's what I found powerful in the trust that I heard in conversation with Mary Pfeiffer and also with Robert Margolla, to the trust that hope is already there. I don't need to bring it in the situation. It's already at work. And it still blows my mind. There's Robert Margolla's, he really switches the power balance, right? He says the person who's suffering has more hope because they experience suffering and they're still here. So imagine the muscles they have. And so what a change of perspective. That's not, I'm not a savior here, but I'm maybe the person who is able to witness this person's strength, or the long breath that they're having here, or what they're taking for granted, but it's actually incredible what they've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk for a minute about what we didn't get a chance to say. What did you hold back? What did I hold back? And I will start by saying that in that conversation with Father Robert, I really, I think I was really struggling through much of the conversations, because I see what we do here and our lives here as very connected to the hope that I have of what is to come. And so I really forced Robert into talking about the hope, in a sure and certain hope of the resurrection. and I don't know that he would have gone in that direction. And once I mentioned it, because he was just so insistent that there is always hope, there is always hope, there is always hope. And, you know, when we talk about hope beyond hope, for me, because much of my career, and I do not want to be, I want to say this very humbly, because I want to, I hope my humbleness, because I really think it's not me at all. Like, it's really not me. But this, one of the spiritual gifts that I think I carry is in ministry of death. I think you carry it too. I think in some ways the idea of like a death doula is a very beautiful idea to me. And I think that's sort of what one of the things that I have always felt humbled to be there as a part of that. And so I really wanted Robert to talk about that, because when we talk about hope beyond hope, for me, a lot of that happens not when the government has let you down 25 times because your food stamps have been rejected again, or because, you know, you're relying on a partner to do something and they just don't change their ways, or, you know, whatever, like all of these ways that we experience, you know, the hope here and now. For me, hope is most felt in those moments. And so I really forced the conversation to go there. And I loved that Father Robert immediately, it was like, oh, well, yes, of course. So that's not what I didn't say, but it's what I hadn't said for many weeks. And I just needed to speak it in that final interview.
Yeah. And that's where I'm like, that's yours. And yeah, when that dimension of hope comes into the picture, I struggle with that. And it's not that's for me not in the picture at all. But I often feel when that dimension comes into the picture, it negates the importance of the struggle here. It so doesn't really matter anymore because it's going to be good over there. So it comes in again. I don't know. It's not how you mean it, but that's how I hear it. That hope comes in as a medicine or as an opium, and to accept things the way they are here. And yes, great Niebuhr serenity prayer. That is a very important part. And yet there's that part where the hope is. I think we are called to hope in this world. And yes, there is a way to think about the hope in the ultimate sense, but I do not want to that the ultimate hope take away without the importance of the relative hope. And that to me is where when I raise my Swiss Social Democrat flag, and it's like this fight is worth it. And the relative hope, what can be here, and however we think of redemption and salvation as beyond what is, the Redeemer is the same person as the Creator, and they are one. And this world matters, and yes, this is not the world we dream about, but they belong together for me. Yeah,
I think that this might be one of those areas where we disagree, only to find that we are more in agreement. Because for me, because what you're describing is sort of a sense of escapism, and sort of like they're there. It doesn't really matter because we have this hope, and you and I both really, I think, struggle with they're in a better place. That's really, really hard for me, because for me, my drive to make this a better place is based on this image that I have of heaven. And so when we pray in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, those are the glasses through which I look out and I see, and this is the thing that I'm just really, really struggling with right now. I see more need, not less. And this is where that mercy and that, mercy ministries and justice ministries, this is where mercy ministries are really like, I think we need to feed people. Absolutely. I think we need to feed people. But why are there so many people who are hungry? And that's not the way the world should be. And I think inside of me, and Ben McConnell says, but this is latent inside of you. This is my hope that is inside of me. And one of the things that I so strongly am just coming more and more to believe in is that the table at which we will sit at the feast in the realm of God does not look like any table that I know. Not in any restaurant, not in any homeless shelter, not in any sanctuary. And I just think we can't rest until the table looks like that. Not only because I want all of the food, but also because I think there is so much need, so much suffering that is needless, although I want to struggle with that word. I want to struggle with that. But so much suffering that we are inflicting on each other as human beings caught in unjust political and societal systems. And I think the work of the church is to say, this is the hope beyond hope, is that there is no more pain, no more sorrow, no more sighing, but only life and life everlasting. And how can we live in that space where we are bearing witness with those who are the peacemakers, because that's really hard work.
Right.
With those who are mourning, with those who are persecuted, with those who are oppressed. How can we bear witness with them for their stories? Because I think that's what it means to be in that realm.
Yeah, and I think again, that we are different, and here we are actually not that far apart from each other.
Yeah.
I think if I keep turning the focus on this worldly hope from escapism that's focused on the other world, I think, yes, the risk is that you end up in a wheel that you feel like this is Sisyphus work. This is like you. It's Miguel de la Torres quotes that we talked about with Ben about the powers are always 10 steps ahead. It feels like that, whatever we do. And yet I want to sing a praise of trying. I quoted that in I quoted the musical Hadestown in a conversation with Tim Scholl and Judy Hart, and it's the story of Orpheus. It's a tragedy, and it does not work. That's how the musical starts, and that's how it ends. It did not work. It still did not work this time, and yet I want to praise the trying. The musical ends with the cast all coming on stage and invites the audience to raise their glasses, and to raise their glasses to the world we dream about and the world we live in now. And I think this ends. I think that's where it comes together, and I think that's where we are called to lean in. That's where we're called to see allies working for that, how this world could be different, that are working outside the walls of this church and who would not even consider themselves Christians or spiritual or any way related to what is near and dear to us. I want to join this work, and yes, maybe somehow this all comes together to that beautiful buffet of scrap food that is the best feast that I can not even imagine. That would be beautiful.
That's my hope. Honestly, I just another thing I was sort of sharing at this conference, as we were in some pretty intense Bible study with Dr. Margaret Amer, who's fabulous Presbyterian scholar at Austin Theology. She's the dean of academics at Austin Theological Seminary, and she's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I was saying is that I really don't think that the healing stories, as you were talking about Rachel Held Evans, the healing stories in the Bible are about the need of the people who we think need to be healed, being healed. And that kind of goes along with what Robert was saying, is that, I'm as someone who is aging and whose body is less and less reliable, I want to be at the point where I can say, these are my scars because I have lived this life. And this life has meant, these things that have happened to me. My body has fought hard to come back from these things. And isn't that a miracle? And, if our spirits are doing that, and so like in the healing of the blind man, I don't think the miracle is that the blind man is healed. I think the miracle is that the people stop and consider the blind man. I think that the miracle in the hearing of the deaf, the man born deaf, is not that the deaf need to be able to hear or need to be able to speak, because ASL, sign language, is 100% a valid and wonderful and beautiful language. So it's not the quote unquote ability or what the world may see as a deficiency in those that society has cast aside. In fact, I just preached last week at a service here about Jesus and the little children. Jesus says, do not stop the children from coming to me, for it is such as them as the kingdom of heaven belongs. And in a lot of my exegesis and my research about that passage, one of the things that kept coming up and up is how society would you shoo the children away because there's so many more important people. Like Jesus needed to be talking to the important people. And they're in that particular scene ahead of time, he's having a conversation. It's a tense conversation, but also that's what they did in having conversations where they disagree. That was just part of interacting with each other. And so one of the things that, that kept coming up in that passage is that when Jesus says, don't stop the children from coming to me, he's upside downing the society to say that the people that you have cast to the side are the ones who should be closest. Because the people that you think are important are not as important as you think. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. The children, this is what society should look like. This is what society should look like. It's not that children need to grow up, not that the blind need to be healed, not that the deaf need to be able to hear and speak, but that the rest of us who are privileged, who have those quote unquote abilities or whatever, that we need to remember that all of these people are invited to the table equally. All of these people. Mm-hmm. So for me, that just changes everything about how we understand the world here and what we're doing and what our hope is, that, those who are mourning, persecuted, oppressed, all of those beatitudes, the peacemakers, that all they will all be at this table equally, because that's what the kingdom is like, the realm of God. That's what
place
it's like.
At the table. Mm-hmm.
For everyone more.
There we are. Yeah. All right. So to wrap things up, I was thinking about that. We decided to embark on that quest for hope in that first season. We thought it would be only fitting to start there with our name, with the Sunrise Road. And for me, that the name is obviously local. That's where we're located, where our church building is located. It's also where, for me, this story is always associated with the disciples on the Easter morning, who return back home because their hope was broken. Right? That is that story. Right? We had hoped. It's the the future two tense. We had hoped, and so and it's that return and the stranger who's joining them. Yeah, I'm not sure I want to go in all detail, otherwise I won't have anything to preach about the Sunday after Easter. All right. But
it's always the fear.
but there is Jesus is lecturing to them. They don't recognize him. But it's in the end, it's the table, it's the breaking of the bread, where things fall into place, where the eyes are opened, and then they suddenly also think they felt it before. It's isn't that interesting, right? It's wasn't our heart burning as the stranger talked to us? And so there is a bodily experience, but that they were not able to connect to in that moment. And so again, it's the hope stories are bread stories, and breaking bread stories usually. No?
Yeah. So where do we go from here? We've talked now about hope, and I think we've had some really excellent guests. We had conversations yesterday about what would go forward, what we would talk about going forward. And I think we're excited about some of the guests that we may have on, in particular, thinking about this podcast in sort of 6 weeks series. So we would start another one after Easter. We may pop up before then, here and there, if there's something interesting to talk about, we sort of bookmarked a conversation about that controversial Super Bowl ad. We want to talk about that a little bit at some point, but also talk, just about things that are happening. So there might be a few drops of the podcast between here and Easter, but then would start back regularly with hopefully every week drops once a week with some intriguing guests. So I think what we'd really like to do is hear from our listeners.
Right. We would love to hear feedback or questions or interested in what you would like to hear more about. You can leave reviews in the different podcast apps or on YouTube. You can comment in there. We will read your comments. You can also send us an email at sunriseroadpod@gmail.com. That comes to us. And we really, because we don't just want to talk out of thin air between the two of us, we would really love for this to be a conversation with you as our listener. And the other call to action to really help us spread the news about this podcast with others, share it with your friends. The best way to help benevolent strangers find this is to leave us a review, ideally a 5-star review, or in your podcast app. To like and subscribe in the YouTube channel, wherever it is you find this podcast. Let others know that you found us, and that helps others find us too.
And I think we would like to close out this first season with a benediction. I think Thomas is prepared with this, and want to give full disclosure that one of the lovely gifts that Marianne gave us early on when we first were talking with her about doing this is access to some materials even before they were published. And we have used the discussion guide for the Hope Book, used it through our study on that book, but also there's some lovely benedictions in there. So this is not something that we have written ourselves, but this is something that comes from the now published version of the discussion guide on Hope, a user's manual.
Yes, and this is the benediction over the last chapter, Hope Beyond Hope. May our lives be one of holy protest, joining our voices with the choir whose footsteps we now follow. May we believe in the redemptive possibilities born from rubble. May we become experts in rest roulette, following what we're feeling and what we're capable of right now. May we move through and not simply get through. May we trust in the future, not that things will work out the way we hope, but that the future will provide the clarity we need to keep going, change direction, or turn back. May we claim what's in our power and go do it. May we stay in the storm, remembering that riding it out together is why we are here.